They were told the Americans would experiment on them, that they would separate families, use children for medical tests, lock them in cages, and leave them to starve. But when 11-year-old Keiko Nakamura clutched her 8-year-old sister Yumi in the darkness of a naval transport ship, what terrified her most wasn't what the Americans might do. It was the promise she had made 3 weeks earlier, standing in the rubble of a Saipan cave with her parents' bodies still warm beneath the stones. "I won't let them take you," she had whispered to Yumi. "No matter what happens, we stay together." Now, as boots echoed on metal stairs above them and a flashlight beam cut through the diesel-stinking darkness of the cargo hold, Keiko wondered if that was a promise she could keep. If this story moves you, if you believe some promises transcend war itself, please hit that like button and subscribe. This is a story that deserves to be remembered. The transport ship USS Henderson pitched violently in Pacific swells, and in the converted cargo hold below deck, 127 Japanese civilians tried not to vomit into the buckets that slid back and forth across the metal floor. Keiko sat in the corner, her back pressed against the cold bulkhead, her arms wrapped around Yumi so tightly she could feel her sister's heartbeat through her threadbare dress. They had been at sea for 3 days. 3 days since leaving Saipan. 3 days since the world ended. Yumi hadn't spoken since the cave, not a single word. She just stared with those dark, hollow eyes that had seen things no 8-year-old should see. Keiko knew because she had seen them too. The chaos. The screaming. The American smoke grenades rolling into the limestone caves where thousands of Japanese civilians had hidden from the invasion. The stampede in the darkness. Their father's voice shouting, "Take Yumi! Go toward the light!" And then the silence. The terrible final silence. Keiko had found Yumi sitting alone outside the cave entrance, covered in dust, rocking back and forth. Their parents never came out. No one ever told them exactly what happened. Cave collapse, suicide, trampled in the panic. It didn't matter. The result was the same. Mama and Papa were gone. At 11 and 8, Keiko and Yumi were orphans in a war zone, surrounded by enemies. The cargo hold lurched again, and an elderly woman nearby moaned in Japanese, praying to gods who seemed to have abandoned them all. The Americans had separated the civilians into groups. Men went one direction, women and children another. Keiko had watched families torn apart on the Saipan beach, fathers dragged away from screaming wives, teenage boys separated from their mothers. She had gripped Yumi's hand so hard her knuckles went white, waiting for a soldier to rip them apart. But the Marine with the clipboard had looked at them, then at his list, then back at them. "Nakamura, Keiko. Nakamura. Yumi. Sisters?" His Japanese was terrible, but Keiko understood. She had nodded frantically. He made a mark on his clipboard and waved them through together. That small mercy had felt like a stay of execution. But Keiko knew it was temporary. The real separation would come later. Everyone said so. An old man in the corner whispered it constantly, his voice carrying through the hold. "In Hawaii, they'll split us up. Children go to orphanages, adults to work camps. They'll take the girls for experiments. I heard it from a man who heard it from a guard." Keiko wanted to cover Yumi's ears, but Yumi wasn't listening anyway. She just clutched the small cloth doll their mother had made her, the only possession that had survived the cave. The sound of boots on metal stairs made everyone in the hold go silent. The hatch opened, spilling weak light down into the darkness. An American sailor appeared, young and pale, his face uncertain. He said something in English, gestured at the buckets. No one moved. He descended the stairs carefully, as if walking into a cage of wild animals. Keiko watched him crouch near an elderly couple, saw him mime drinking water. The old man spat at his feet. The sailor flinched but didn't react with anger. He just set down a large metal canteen and backed away, climbing the stairs quickly. After he left, no one touched the canteen for 10 minutes. Finally, someone checked it. Just water. Clean water. Keiko's throat was so dry it hurt to swallow, but she didn't trust it. Why would the enemy give them water? What was in it? But then Yumi stirred in her arms, her cracked lips moving soundlessly, and Keiko's resolve crumbled. She crawled across the hold, filled one of the tin cups, and brought it back. She tasted it first. If it was poisoned, better her than Yumi. It was just water. Cold, metallic, but clean. She held the cup to Yumi's lips and watched her sister drink in small, desperate sips. Around them, other prisoners began to move toward the canteen. The sailor returned an hour later with hard crackers and canned vegetables. Again, everyone hesitated. Again, hunger won. This became the pattern for 5 days. Sailors brought food and water. No one was beaten. No one was taken away. It made no sense. Keiko had been warned about American brutality. The propaganda had been clear. Americans were savages who didn't follow the rules of war. They tortured prisoners. They experimented on children. But these sailors just looked tired and young and uncomfortable. They delivered supplies and left quickly, avoiding eye contact. On the 4th night, a storm hit. The ship rolled so violently that people slid across the floor, slamming into bulkheads. Keiko braced herself and Yumi in the corner, using her body as a shield. Water sloshed through gaps in the hatch above, soaking everyone. An elderly woman screamed that they were sinking, that the Americans had put them on a doomed ship on purpose. Panic rippled through the hold. Then the hatch opened and a different sailor appeared, older with a weathered face. He shouted something in English and gestured urgently. When no one moved, he descended the stairs and began physically helping people secure themselves to support beams with cargo straps. He reached Keiko and Yumi, pointed at a beam, and showed them how to hold on. His eyes met Keiko's for just a second. She saw no cruelty there, just concern. Then he moved on to help others. The storm passed by morning. The sailor never returned, but Keiko couldn't stop thinking about his face. That moment of eye contact. If they were taking her and Yumi somewhere to die, why would he care if they survived the storm? On the 5th day, someone shouted, "Land!" Keiko pressed her face to a gap in the bulkhead and saw it. Hawaii. Green mountains rising from impossibly blue water. It looked like paradise. It looked like a lie. The ship docked with a shudder of metal on wood. Above deck, orders were shouted in English. The hatch opened and sunlight poured in, blinding after days of dimness. An American voice barked commands. The Japanese interpreter, a young corporal who looked barely old enough to shave, translated. "Line up, single file, bring your belongings, follow instructions." Keiko had no belongings except Yumi. She took her sister's hand and joined the line of shuffling civilians climbing the stairs toward daylight. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. This was it. This was where separation happened. She had heard the rumors. Hawaii had different camps, children sent one place, adults another, families destroyed systematically. They emerged onto the deck and Keiko's eyes adjusted slowly. She saw a dock, guard towers, barbed wire fences, and beyond that rows of low buildings. Not cages, buildings, but that meant nothing. They could still separate them inside. American soldiers lined the gangplank, rifles slung over shoulders. They looked tense, wary. One gestured for the line to move forward. Keiko descended the gangplank with Yumi pressed against her side. Her sister's hand was so small in hers, so fragile. If they tried to take her, Keiko would fight. She would scream. She would bite and claw and do whatever it took. They were herded toward a long table where American officers sat with clipboards. This was processing. This was where decisions were made. Keiko's mouth went dry. Behind her, a woman whispered, "This is where they separate us. I knew it. I knew it." The line moved slowly forward. Keiko watched families ahead of them. A mother with 3 children was divided. The teenage son sent left. The mother and younger children sent right. The mother screamed. The guards didn't respond with violence, just firm hands redirecting. But the separation happened. It was happening. Keiko pulled Yumi closer. 2 people ahead of them now. Her mind raced through options. Run? Where? They were on an island surrounded by guards. Plead? In what language? Her English was limited to a few phrases her father had taught her. Please. Help. We are children. Would that be enough? One person ahead, an elderly couple. Sent to the right together. Small mercy. Then it was Keiko's turn. The American officer behind the table looked up. He was older, maybe 40, with gray at his temples and deep lines around his eyes. His uniform said Lieutenant Morrison. He glanced at his clipboard. Name? His voice was flat, professional. The interpreter, Corporal Ito, translated. Keiko's voice came out as a whisper. Nakamura Keiko. Nakamura Yumi. Morrison wrote something down. Ages? 11. 8. Parents? Keiko's throat closed. She forced the words out. Dead. Saipan. Morrison's pen stopped moving. He looked up, really looked at them. Keiko saw his eyes shift from her face to Yumi's, taking in how the little girl was pressed against her sister, how her knuckles were white from gripping Keiko's hand, how she wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. Morrison said something to Ito in English. Ito responded. Morrison frowned, said something else. Ito turned to Keiko. He asked if you have other family here. Aunts, uncles, grandparents? No, just us. Just me and Yumi. Ito translated. Morrison asked another question. He asks if you are responsible for your sister. Yes. The word burst out of Keiko, too loud, too desperate. I take care of her. I promised. Please, please don't separate us. Please. The last word came out in English. One of her father's phrases. She saw Morrison register it, saw something shift in his expression. He looked at Yumi again. The little girl was trembling now, sensing the tension. And then Yumi spoke. For the first time in 3 weeks, her voice emerged, small and broken and speaking words Keiko had taught her in whispered lessons on the ship. Please. Don't separate us. The English was heavily accented but clear. Morrison's eyes widened slightly. He looked at Yumi, then at Keiko, then down at his clipboard. The silence stretched. Keiko felt like she was falling. Morrison made a decision. He drew a line on his clipboard, wrote something in the margin, and spoke to Ito without looking up. Ito translated, and his voice was gentle. You will be assigned to the children's barracks together. You will share a bunk. You will not be separated. Keiko didn't understand. What? He says you stay together. But the others. They separated the others. Ito glanced at Morrison, who nodded permission to explain. Adults and children go to different areas. Men and women separated. But siblings... He paused. Lieutenant Morrison says siblings stay together when possible. Wow. You are both children. Both sisters. You stay together. Promise? The word came out in Japanese first, then English. Promise? Morrison looked directly at Keiko. He spoke slowly, clearly, so even without translation she could hear the weight in his voice. Ito translated anyway. He gives you his word. As an officer, you will not be separated. Keiko searched his face for deception, for cruelty, for the trap. She saw none of it, just a tired man trying to do his job with something that looked like decency. She didn't trust it. Couldn't trust it. But she had no choice. Thank you. The English words felt strange in her mouth. Morrison nodded once, gestured for them to move along. A guard directed them toward a group of children gathering near a military truck. Keiko walked in a daze, Yumi's hand still locked in hers. The promise had been made, but promises, she knew, could be broken. The children's barracks at Sand Island was a long wooden building that smelled of fresh paint and disinfectant. 40 metal bunk beds lined the walls, 20 on each side, with thin mattresses and clean white sheets folded at the foot of each bed. Keiko stood in the doorway, holding Yumi's hand, and tried to reconcile what she was seeing with what she had expected. No cages, no dirt floors, just beds. Actual beds. A severe-looking Japanese woman in her 50s approached them. She wore a plain dress and had her hair pulled back in a tight bun. She spoke in Japanese, her voice crisp and efficient. I am Mrs. Yamamoto. I manage this barracks. You are the Nakamura sisters? Keiko nodded, mute. Bunk 17, bottom level. You will share it. Mrs. Yamamoto's expression softened almost imperceptibly. I know it is small for two, but you are small girls. You will manage. We stay together? Keiko had to confirm it again. Yes, those are the orders. Mrs. Yamamoto gestured toward the back of the barracks. Put your things there. Wash up. Dinner is at 6. They had no things. Just themselves and the clothes on their backs and Yumi's cloth doll. Keiko led her sister to bunk 17 and sat down on the thin mattress. It felt like luxury after 5 days on a metal floor. Yumi climbed up beside her and immediately pressed against her side. Other children were scattered throughout the barracks. Some were crying quietly. Others sat in silence, faces blank with shock. A few whispered to each other in small groups. Keiko noticed that most were older children, 10 to 14. Younger ones like Yumi were rare. A boy about 13 approached, his face hard and suspicious. You came from Saipan? Yes. They separated your parents? No, our parents are dead. The boy's expression flickered. Mine too. Saipan cave. He said it matter-of-factly as if reporting the weather. I'm Taro. Been here 3 months. 3 months, and you're still... Keiko couldn't finish the question. Still alive? Still together with my brother? Taro gestured to a younger boy sleeping on a nearby bunk. Yeah, but don't trust them. This is all temporary. They're deciding what to do with us. Once they decide, everything changes. Before Keiko could respond, a bell rang. Mrs. Yamamoto appeared at the front of the barracks. Dinner. Line up. The children filed out in rough formation. Keiko kept Yumi close, hyper-aware of every guard, every adult, every potential threat. They were led to a mess hall, another wooden building with long tables and benches. The smell hit Keiko before she entered. Food. Real food. American soldiers stood behind a serving line, scooping food onto metal trays. Keiko took a tray, moved through the line in a daze. Rice, vegetables, some kind of meat and gravy, bread. It was more food than she had seen in weeks. She found a seat at a table with Yumi, set the tray between them, and stared. Why would they feed us this much? She whispered to Taro, who sat across from them. I don't know. That's what makes it worse. If they were just cruel, I could understand. But this? He gestured at the food. This is something else. A girl next to him, maybe 10 years old, spoke quietly. Maybe they're fattening us up. For something. Emiko, stop, Taro said. But he didn't sound convinced she was wrong. Keiko picked up her fork. The food could be poisoned. It could be drugged. But Yumi was looking at it with desperate hunger, and Keiko couldn't watch her starve. She took a small bite. The meat was salty and rich, the gravy thick. Her stomach, empty for so long, cramped with the shock of real food. She chewed slowly, waiting for dizziness, for pain, for whatever poison might come. Nothing happened. Just food. She gave Yumi permission with a nod, and her sister began to eat in tiny, careful bites. Around them, other children did the same. Some cried as they ate. Others ate in grim silence. Keiko noticed American soldiers at nearby tables, eating the same food from the same kitchen. If it was poisoned, they would die too. That realization should have been comforting. It wasn't. It just deepened the confusion. After dinner, they were led back to the barracks. Mrs. Yamamoto explained the schedule. Wake at 6, breakfast at 7, school at 8. Yes, school. Keiko heard the word and couldn't process it. School? They were prisoners. Why would prisoners need school? You will learn English, Mrs. Yamamoto said. You will study mathematics, reading, basic sciences. You will keep your minds active. Idle minds lead to despair. That night, lying in the narrow bunk with Yumi curled against her, Keiko couldn't sleep. The barracks was heated, not warm but not freezing. There were blankets, rough wool, but clean. Through the window she could see guard towers, searchlights sweeping the compound, reminders that this was a prison. But it was a prison that fed them. That gave them beds. That promised school. Nothing made sense. Yumi's small voice broke the silence. Keiko? Yes? Are we safe? Keiko wanted to say yes, wanted to offer comfort, but she didn't know. I think we're safer than we were. The American man, Lieutenant Morrison. He seemed what? Not mean. Keiko had thought the same thing, but hadn't wanted to admit it. Admitting it felt like betrayal. Of what, she wasn't sure. Of Japan? Of their parents? Of the truth they had been taught about Americans? Sleep, Keiko whispered. Tomorrow we'll understand more. But tomorrow only brought more contradictions. Morning came with a bell at 6. The children rose, groggy and disoriented. They were given 15 minutes to wash and dress, then marched to breakfast. More food. Eggs this time. Toast. Coffee. Real coffee. Chaptin, not the acorn substitute they'd had in Saipan. Keiko drank it black and bitter, letting the heat wake her up. After breakfast, they were led to a converted barracks that served as a classroom. A middle-aged Chinese-American woman stood at the front, her expression kind but firm. She introduced herself as Mrs. Chen, speaking both English and Japanese. I am your teacher. You will learn English because it will help you survive. You will learn other subjects because education is a right, not a privilege. Taro muttered something sarcastic, but Mrs. Chen ignored him. The first lesson was basic English. Greetings. Introductions. My name is... Thank you. Please. Keiko absorbed every word with fierce concentration. English meant communication. Communication meant survival. She memorized phrases like weapons. Yumi sat beside her, drawing on a piece of paper Mrs. Chen had provided. She wasn't paying attention to the lesson, but Mrs. Chen didn't scold her. She just let the little girl draw while trauma worked its way through her system. During a break, Keiko approached Mrs. Chen. Why do you teach us? Mrs. Chen looked surprised by the directness. Because you need teaching. But we are enemy. Mrs. Chen's expression darkened. You are children. Children are not the enemy. The men who make war are the enemy. Japan hurt you? Keiko guessed, reading the pain in the woman's face. Yes, in Nanking. Japanese soldiers destroyed my city, killed my family. Mrs. Chen's voice was steady, but her eyes were wet. But you were not in Nanking. You were just a girl trying to protect her sister. I will not punish you for crimes you did not commit. The word struck Keiko like a physical blow. She had expected hatred. She had expected cruelty. Instead, she found a woman who had every reason to hate her, choosing not to. That afternoon, Keiko was assigned to kitchen duty. She was taken to the main mess hall, where a large black American sergeant named Baker ran the kitchen with efficient authority. He spoke no Japanese, but communicated through gestures and a translator, Corporal Ito. Baker showed Keiko how to wash dishes properly, how to scrub pots, how to organize the drying racks. The work was hard but mindless, which Keiko appreciated. It kept her hands busy while her mind tried to process everything. At one point, Baker pulled a piece of bread from the oven, buttered it, and handed it to Keiko. For you, Ito translated. You're working hard. Keiko stared at the bread. It was still warm. Baker had given it to her for no reason except kindness. She took it, whispered thank you in English, and saw Baker's face break into a wide smile. Good. Your English is good. He gave her a thumbs up. That small gesture of approval shouldn't have mattered, but it did. A week passed. Then 2. Routine established itself. Wake, eat, school, work, eat, sleep. Keiko worked in the kitchen. Yumi helped fold laundry in a room where Keiko could see her through an open door. They were never separated for more than an hour. Morrison's promise held. But Keiko waited for the other shoe to drop, for the announcement that would change everything. For the moment when kindness revealed itself as a trap. It came in week 3. Mrs. Yamamoto called Keiko aside after breakfast. Her face was serious. "You are being transferred." Keiko's world stopped. The air left her lungs. "No, you promised. Morrison promised." "Transferred to different work duty," Mrs. Yamamoto continued calmly. "More responsibility. You will work in the main administrative kitchen, not just washing dishes. Larger role. Small payment." "Payment?" Keiko couldn't process the word. 10 cents per day in camp script. You can buy items at the canteen." "But I stay with Yumi?" "Of course. You sleep here every night. This is just day work." The relief was so intense Keiko nearly collapsed. Not separation, just different work. She nodded, unable to speak. Mrs. Yamamoto's expression softened. "Keiko, I know you are afraid, but Lieutenant Morrison keeps his word. I have been here 6 months. I have seen him keep his word many times." "Why?" The question burst out. "Why does he care?" "Because he is a good man trying to do his job in a bad situation. There are not many like him, but there are some." That night, Keiko wrote her first entry in a small notebook Mrs. Chen had given her. She wrote in Japanese, the characters flowing across the page. Day 21. "They have not separated us. They feed us. They teach us. They pay us for work. I don't understand. The enemy is supposed to be cruel. But Lieutenant Morrison kept his promise. Sergeant Baker gives me bread. Mrs. Chen teaches me even though Japan hurt her. I am more confused every day. Who am I supposed to hate? Who am I supposed to trust? I only know this. Yumi is safe. Yumi is with me. That is all that matters." She closed the notebook and looked at her sister, sleeping peacefully for the first time since Saipan. The cloth doll was tucked under Yumi's arm. Her face was relaxed, almost content. Keiko had promised to keep Yumi safe, to keep them together. She was keeping that promise. But something else was happening too, something she didn't have words for yet. The enemy was becoming human. And that was the most terrifying thing of all. October arrived with cooler winds that swept across Sand Island, carrying the smell of salt and distant rain. Keiko had been in the camp for 3 months now. 3 months of routine, 3 months of promises kept. 3 months of cognitive dissonance that grew sharper every day. She worked in the main kitchen now, 6 hours daily, standing beside Sergeant Baker as he taught her to make biscuits, to season vegetables, to organize inventory. The work earned her 70 cents a week in camp scrip, small metal tokens she could exchange at the canteen for soap, pencils, candy bars. The first time she held the tokens in her palm, she stared at them for 10 minutes, unable to comprehend. Prisoners were not supposed to be paid. Prisoners were supposed to be worked until they dropped. But here she was, earning wages, learning skills. Being treated like a person. Yumi had changed too. She spoke now, not much, but enough. Short sentences in Japanese, a few words in English. She attended Mrs. Chen's classes and actually participated, raising her hand to answer simple questions. She played with other children during recreation time, a hesitant kind of play, but play nonetheless. The hollow look in her eyes had faded, replaced by something Keiko didn't dare name, hope. It terrified her. Because hope meant trust, and trust meant lowering defenses. And the moment they lowered their defenses, that was when the trap would spring. Keiko believed this with absolute certainty. The kindness was temporary, a test, a strategy. Soon the truth would reveal itself. The announcement came on October 15th, Keiko's 12th birthday, though she hadn't mentioned it to anyone. Mrs. Yamamoto gathered all the children after breakfast, her face more serious than usual. "Some of you will be transferred to the mainland," she said in Japanese. "Family reunification program. Families on the mainland have volunteered to sponsor Japanese children, give them homes, education, normal lives outside the camp." The barracks erupted in whispers. Taro stood up, his face flushed with anger. "Separated from our real families, sent to live with Americans. This is what I said. This is the plan." "Sit down," Mrs. Yamamoto said sharply. "This is voluntary. You can refuse. You can stay here until repatriation to Japan becomes possible." "When will that be?" Emiko asked, her voice small. "Unknown. The war continues. Could be months. Could be years." Years. Keiko felt the word like a weight on her chest. Years in this limbo. Years of waiting. Years of not knowing. Mrs. Yamamoto held up a paper. "The list of those selected will be posted tomorrow. If your name appears, you will meet with Lieutenant Morrison to discuss options. That is all." That night, Keiko couldn't sleep. She lay in the bunk with Yumi pressed against her side, staring at the ceiling. If their names were on that list, what would it mean? A family on the mainland, living outside the barbed wire, but with strangers, Americans, the enemy. And would they take both sisters? Or just one? The fear that had been dormant for weeks roared back to life. Keiko, Yumi's whisper cut through the darkness. Yes? If we have to go, we go together, right? Always together, Keiko said automatically. But the promise felt hollow this time. She had no control, no power. She was 11 years old in an enemy prison camp. What she wanted didn't matter. The next morning, the list appeared on the barracks door. 20 names. Keiko pushed through the crowd of children, her heart hammering. Her eyes scanned the handwritten roster. Nakamura, Keiko, Nakamura, Yumi. The world tilted. She read it again. Both names. Together. But that meant nothing. The list just meant they were selected for consideration. The actual placement could still separate them. All children on the list report to Administration Building at 1400 hours, Mrs. Yamamoto announced. 2 o'clock. The hours until 2 felt like years. Keiko tried to work in the kitchen, but Sergeant Baker noticed her distraction and sent her back to the barracks early. You need rest, kiddo. You look like a ghost. Yumi was waiting for her, sitting on their bunk, clutching Sakura, the cloth doll. I'm scared, she said in English. Her accent was thick, but the words were clear. Me too. At 2 o'clock, they walked to the administration building, a small structure near the main gate. 20 children filed into a waiting room. One by one, they were called into an office. Keiko heard crying from inside. A boy emerged, his face red, shaking his head. They want to send me to Nebraska, alone. I said no. When Keiko's name was called, she took Yumi's hand and walked into the office together. Lieutenant Morrison sat behind a desk, looking older than Keiko remembered. 3 months had aged him. Gray strands had multiplied at his temples. Deep lines bracketed his mouth. Corporal Ito stood beside him, ready to translate. Morrison gestured to the chairs. Sit. They sat. Yumi's hand was slick with sweat in Keiko's grip. Morrison opened a folder, scanned it, then looked at them. Through Ito, he spoke. I'm going to be direct with you. 2 families on the mainland have expressed interest in sponsoring children from this camp. One family in California wants an older girl to help on their farm. They specifically requested someone responsible, good worker. They asked for you, Keiko. Keiko's stomach dropped. Morrison continued. Another family in Oregon wants a young child. They lost their daughter last year to illness. They want someone Yumi's age to fill that space. No. 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 They're separating us, Keiko said flatly. Morrison held up a hand. I'm not finished. He looked at Ito, nodded. Ito continued translating. Both families were contacted about taking siblings. Both said no, one child only. Too much expense, too much responsibility in wartime. Keiko stood up so fast the chair tipped backward. Then we don't go. We stay here. Together. Morrison's expression didn't change. Sit down, Keiko. No, you promised. You said we wouldn't be separated. I know what I promised. Sit down. Something in his voice made her obey. She righted the chair and sat, trembling with rage and fear. Morrison leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk. I made 37 phone calls in the last 4 days. To every family on the mainland sponsorship list. Every single one. Do you understand? 37 calls. Keiko didn't understand why that mattered. I asked each family if they would consider taking siblings. Most said no immediately. Too expensive, too complicated. They want one child, not 2. Morrison's jaw tightened. But one family said yes. The world stopped. What? Keiko whispered. Ito translated carefully. The Anderson family, Colorado. They lost both their sons in the war. One in France, one in the Philippines. They're farmers. Older couple. They said... Ito paused, his own voice thick with emotion. They said their sons died fighting Japanese soldiers, but that doesn't mean they have to hate Japanese children. They said sisters shouldn't be separated. They said they would take both of you. Keiko couldn't breathe, couldn't process it. Both? Both, Morrison confirmed. Together, that is the offer. You would live with the Andersons on their farm in Colorado. You would work, age-appropriate chores. You would attend local school. You would be foster children until the war ends and repatriation becomes possible. And if we say no? Keiko's voice was barely audible. You stay here, which is also an option. This camp is not the worst place. You're fed, educated, safe, but it's still a camp. Still barbed wire, still guards. Morrison's eyes were steady on hers. The Andersons are offering something else, a chance at an almost normal life, outside these fences. Yumi tugged Keiko's sleeve. Together? She asked in English, looking at Morrison. Morrison nodded. Together. Yumi looked at Keiko. I want to go. If we're together. Keiko's mind raced. This was the trap. Had to be. The Andersons would take them to Colorado and then separate them. Or worse, use them as slave labor, punish them for being Japanese. This was the cruelty everyone had warned about. Just dressed up as kindness. But then she looked at Morrison, really looked at him, at the exhaustion in his face, at the way he met her eyes without flinching, at the folder on his desk, thick with papers. 37 phone calls. He had made 37 calls for 2 Japanese orphan girls. Why? She asked. Why do you care? Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke directly in English, slowly enough that Keiko could follow some of it. Ito translated the rest. Because I have a daughter. She's 9, back in Oregon. And if I was dead and she was alone and she was scared, I would want someone to help her. Even if that someone was the enemy. I would want someone to keep their promises to her. Keiko felt something crack inside her chest, the wall she had built to protect herself from trust, from hope. Ichuru, from believing that the enemy could be human. It cracked. Didn't shatter, not yet, but cracked. What do we have to do? She asked. Say yes, sign papers. Train ride to Colorado in 2 weeks. The Andersons will meet you at the station. Morrison pulled out 2 sheets of paper. But Keiko, you have to understand. I can only promise what happens here, in this camp. I can't control what happens in Colorado. I've vetted the Andersons. Red Cross has vetted them. They seem like good people, but I can't guarantee anything. Can we come back? If it's bad? Morrison exchanged a look with Ito. Technically, yes, but it would be complicated. Take time. Paperwork. So they would be on their own. Truly on their own, with no Morrison to keep promises. Keiko looked at Yumi. Her sister's eyes were wide, hopeful, terrified. 8 years old and looking to her 11-year-old sister to make an impossible decision. Keiko remembered their father's last words. Take Yumi. Go toward the light. Maybe this was the light. We'll go, she said. Together. Morrison nodded. Together. I'll make the arrangements. As they stood to leave, Morrison said one more thing. Keiko, if anything goes wrong, you write to me. You have my word. If you need help, I will help. That promise doesn't end when you leave this camp. Keiko nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She took Yumi's hand and walked out of the office. In the hallway, Yumi looked up at her. Did we do the right thing? I don't know, Keiko admitted, but we're together. That's all I know how to do. Keep us together. That night she wrote in her notebook. Lieutenant Morrison made 37 phone calls for us. 37. I didn't think the enemy could care that much. I didn't think they could care at all. But he kept his promise. Again. Even though keeping it was hard. Even though it took effort. Maybe he really is the kind of man who keeps promises. Maybe some promises transcend war. I'm going to trust him one more time. I'm going to trust that the Andersons are who he says they are. Because if I don't trust something, I'll break. And Yumi needs me not to break. 2 weeks later, they stood on a train platform with a small bag of donated clothes and Yumi's cloth doll. Morrison was there to see them off. So was Sergeant Baker, who pressed a paper bag into Keiko's hands. Biscuits, for the trip. Made them myself. Mrs. Chen gave Keiko a book. English dictionary. Keep learning. Mrs. Yamamoto adjusted their collars with brisk efficiency, but her eyes were wet. Be good girls. Make us proud. Morrison knelt to their level one last time. Remember what I told you. Anything goes wrong, you write. I mean it. Yumi surprised everyone by hugging him. Morrison stiffened, then awkwardly patted her back. You'll be okay, kiddo. Both of you. The train whistle blew. Keiko and Yumi climbed aboard and found seats by a window. As the train pulled away, they waved to the small group on the platform. Morrison waved back, standing at attention until they were out of sight. 3 days later, the train pulled into a small station in Colorado. Through the window, Keiko saw them. An older couple, weathered and sturdy, standing on the platform. The woman held a sign. Welcome, Keiko and Yumi. This was it. The moment of truth. They stepped off the train. The couple approached. The woman, Martha Anderson, had kind eyes and work-worn hands. The man, Robert Anderson, was tall and quiet, with a gentle smile. Martha spoke first. You must be Keiko and Yumi. We're so glad you're here. Keiko understood enough English to know it was a welcome. She responded carefully. Thank you for taking us. Robert picked up their small bag. Let's get you home. You must be tired. Home. The word hung in the air. Not a camp. Not barracks. Home. They drove through rolling farmland to a white farmhouse with a red barn and mountains in the distance. Inside, Martha showed them a small bedroom with 2 beds pushed together. I thought you might want to stay close, she said gently. That night, lying in a real bed with clean sheets and Yumi beside her, Keiko whispered, "We made it. We're together." "Because Lieutenant Morrison kept his promise," Yumi said. "Yes, because he kept his promise." And for the first time since Saipan, Keiko allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, some promises were worth trusting. 3 months passed on the Anderson farm. 3 months of learning to milk cows and gather eggs and speak English with increasing confidence. 3 months of Martha teaching them to bake bread and Robert showing them how to fix fence posts. 3 months of attending a small rural school where other children stared at them with curiosity, sometimes suspicion, but never outright cruelty. Keiko waited for the cruelty to come, waited for the Andersons to reveal their true nature, to work them too hard, to punish them for being Japanese, to separate them. It never came. Instead, Robert taught Yumi how to ride a horse. Martha braided Keiko's hair before school. They ate dinner together every night at a wooden table in a warm kitchen. They said grace before meals, which confused Keiko at first, but she learned to bow her head respectfully. They celebrated Christmas with a small tree and simple gifts. Yumi got a new doll, handmade by Martha. Keiko got books, real books in English, because Martha had noticed her reading everything she could find. It felt like a dream. A fragile, temporary dream that could shatter at any moment. Then came the letter in March 1945. It arrived on a Tuesday, addressed to Keiko in careful handwriting she didn't recognize. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Dear Keiko, I hope this letter finds you well. I am writing to inform you that my niece, Yumi, and I are being transferred from Sand Island to Tule Lake Relocation Center in California. Tule Lake is for Japanese who have refused to pledge loyalty to the United States. I wanted you to know that I am thinking of you both. I hope Colorado is treating you kindly. With respect, Corporal Ito. Keiko read it 3 times. Ito was being transferred to Tule Lake, the camp for the disloyal, the camp where conditions were reportedly much harsher, where tensions ran high, where violence between prisoners and guards was common. That night she couldn't sleep. She thought about Ito, who had translated Morrison's promises with such gentle patience, who had sent Yumi letters on the ship, who had always treated them with kindness. Now he was being sent somewhere terrible. She got up, found paper and pencil, and wrote back. Dear Corporal Ito, thank you for writing. We are safe in Colorado. The Andersons are kind. Yumi is happy. I am learning. I am sorry you are going to Tule Lake. I don't understand why they are sending you there. You were always good to us. Please stay safe. If you need anything, please write. Your friend, Keiko. She sent the letter, knowing it was a small gesture, knowing it changed nothing, but needing to try anyway. 2 weeks later, another letter arrived. This one was from Morrison. Dear Keiko, I heard from Mrs. Anderson that you are adjusting well. I am glad. I wanted to write to tell you something. The war in Europe has ended. Germany has surrendered. The Pacific War continues, but there's hope it will end soon. When it does, decisions will be made about Japanese internment, about repatriation, about what happens to children like you and Yumi. I cannot predict what those decisions will be, but I want you to know that whatever happens, the promise I made still stands. You and Yumi will not be separated if I have anything to say about it. I will continue to advocate for you both. Stay strong. Lieutenant Morrison. Keiko showed the letter to Yumi, translating it into Japanese. Yumi, now 9, had grown taller, stronger. Her English was nearly fluent. She no longer had nightmares every night. She smiled easily now, laughed at Robert's terrible jokes, helped Martha in the garden. Do you think we'll have to go back to Japan? Yumi asked. I don't know. Maybe. I don't remember Japan very well anymore. Keiko felt a pang of guilt. You should remember, Mama and Papa, our house, the sugarcane fields. I remember them, Yumi said quietly. I don't remember what it felt like to be there. This feels more real now. That night, Keiko wrote in her journal, which was nearly full. Yumi is forgetting Japan. Or maybe not forgetting, but moving past it. Is that wrong? Is it betrayal? I don't know who we're supposed to be anymore. Japanese girls in America. Enemy children living with an American family. Orphans who have found something like a home. I don't know what to call us. I only know that we're together. Morrison kept his promise. The Andersons kept their word. Maybe that's enough. In August 1945, the world changed again. Atomic bombs, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Japan's surrender. The war was over. Keiko and Yumi listened to the announcement on the Andersons' radio, not fully comprehending the magnitude. Robert and Martha were quiet, respectful, knowing this was complicated for their foster daughters. That night, Martha sat with them in their room. The war is over. That's good news. But it also means decisions will be made. About what happens to Japanese people in America. About whether you go back to Japan. Do we have to go? Yumi asked, her voice small. Martha's eyes filled with tears. I don't know, sweetheart. That's not my decision. But I want you to know. If you could stay, we would want you to. You've become part of our family. Keiko felt something break open inside her. Not the crack from before, but a full shattering. The wall she'd built to protect herself from trust, from hope, from believing in the kindness of former enemies. It shattered completely. She started crying, deep, racking sobs she'd been holding in for over a year. Martha pulled her close, and Yumi joined them, and they sat together on the bed, crying for everything lost and everything found. In September, another letter arrived from Morrison. Dear Keiko, the war has ended. Internment camps are being closed. Japanese Americans are being released, though where they will go is uncertain. For Japanese nationals like you and Yumi, the situation is more complicated. The U.S. government is arranging repatriation ships to Japan. You would be eligible for transport if you want to return. However, I have been in contact with the Andersons. They have expressed a desire to formally foster you both until you are 18, with the possibility of adoption if that becomes legally feasible. This would require paperwork, approvals, time, but it is possible. The choice is yours. Do you want to return to Japan? Or do you want to stay with the Andersons? Write back and let me know. Whatever you decide, I will support it. And Keiko, I want you to know something. I made you a promise 2 years ago on a dock in Hawaii. I promised you and Yumi would not be separated. I have kept that promise. I will continue to keep it. No matter what you choose, you have my word. Lieutenant Morrison. Keiko read the letter to Yumi. Then they sat in silence for a long time. What do you want? Keiko finally asked. Yumi looked out the window at the Colorado mountains. I want to stay. Is that wrong? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. What about you? Keiko thought about Japan, about the rubble of Saipan, about parents buried under stones, about a country she barely remembered. Then she thought about Martha's bread, Robert's quiet kindness, Morrison's 37 phone calls, Sergeant Baker's biscuits. I think, she said slowly, I think Mama and Papa would want us to be safe, to be together, to have a life. Can we have that here? Maybe we already do. They wrote back to Morrison together, Keiko's handwriting careful and clear. Dear Lieutenant Morrison, we want to stay, with the Andersons, in Colorado, if that is possible. We are together, we are safe, we are home. Thank you for keeping your promise, always. Keiko and Yumi Nakamura. The paperwork took months. There were interviews, approvals, legal complications. But in February 1946, the final documents arrived. Keiko and Yumi Nakamura were officially fostered to Robert and Martha Anderson. They could stay in America. They could stay together. That spring, Morrison visited Colorado. He appeared at the Anderson farm in his uniform, older now, grayer, but the same steady eyes. Keiko and Yumi ran to him, and he hugged them both awkwardly, still not quite comfortable with affection. You kept your promise, Keiko said in clear English. Yes, Morrison said simply. I did. Why? We were just enemy children. Morrison looked at her seriously. You were never my enemy. You were two scared little girls who needed help. That's all you ever were. Before he left, he gave Keiko a small package. Inside was a photograph from Sand Island, Morrison standing with the children's barracks in the background. On the back, he'd written, A promise kept. 1944, 1946. Keiko kept that photograph for the rest of her life. Years passed, decades. Keiko and Yumi grew up American, attended college, married, had children. They visited Japan once. In 1968, found distant relatives, saw the rebuilt cities. But Colorado was home. The Andersons, who they called Mom and Dad, were family. In 1995, 50 years after the war ended, Keiko stood in front of a classroom of high school students holding Morrison's photograph. Yumi stood beside her. They had been invited to speak about their experience. We were told Americans would separate us, Keiko said, her English perfect now, only the slightest accent remaining. That they would be cruel, that they would treat us as less than human. And yes, internment was wrong. The camps were wrong. But inside that wrong system, there were individuals who chose differently. Lieutenant Morrison promised two terrified little girls they would stay together, and he fought to keep that promise, not because he had to, but because he believed promises mattered. Sergeant Baker baked me a birthday cake. Mrs. Chen taught me even though Japanese soldiers had destroyed her family. The Andersons gave us a home. These were small acts. But small acts, repeated, become something larger. They become proof that even in war, humanity can survive. After the talk, a student raised her hand. Do you still talk to Lieutenant Morrison? Keiko smiled sadly. He passed away in 1992, but I visited him before he died. I brought my children and Yumi's children, and I thanked him one last time for keeping his promise. What did he say? He said, "You girls were worth every phone call." That night, Keiko sat in her study, surrounded by photographs, her American family, her Japanese heritage, the life she'd built from the ashes of war. She opened the old journal from Sand Island, now fragile with age, and wrote one final entry. They told us to expect cruelty. We found mercy. They told us to expect separation. We found someone who fought to keep us together. Lieutenant Morrison, Sergeant Baker, Mrs. Chen, Corporal Ito, the Andersons, they didn't have to be kind. Kindness was a choice, and their choices changed everything. Yumi and I survived because of a promise made on a Hawaiian dock in 1944. Because one man believed that even enemy children deserve dignity. That promise echoes through our children, our grandchildren, through every life we've touched. Some promises transcend war. Some promises last forever. And the promise that kept us together, that was one of them. She closed the journal and looked at Morrison's photograph one more time. Thank you, she whispered to the past, for seeing us, for keeping your word, for proving that mercy is stronger than hate. And in that quiet moment, 50 years after stepping off a train in Colorado, Keiko finally understood. They had survived not just because of one promise, but because that promise had been the first crack in a wall of hatred. And through that crack, light had poured in. Enough light to build a life. Enough light to prove that even in the darkest times, humanity can survive. If we choose it, if we fight for it, if we keep our promises.